So John Metchie goes in round 2, and I will be the first person to admit, John Metchie is one of the most difficult wide receivers in this draft to go ahead and evaluate. And there are a couple reasons for this. But the main reason, and this is such a unique situation, is the competition for targets John Metchie has seen throughout his entire collegiate career goes to Alabama. And we could just take this season by season so you can have an idea of what John Metchie dealt with at Alabama. And I will say, this Alabama wide receiver core, pretty much every single season since like 2017, it would have been one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. And with John Metchie going up against some of these players, it was just unfair to say the least. So John Metchie gets to Alabama in 2019. Here are the leading receivers for Alabama that season: Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris. John Metchie comes away with 23 receiving yards. So yeah, you don't want to see 23 receiving yards as a true freshman. You know you want those players to break out early, but you can't hold that against John Metchie. You're telling me that if an 18-year-old's able to beat out Devontae Smith, if he's able to beat out Jerry Jeudy, if he's able to beat out Henry Ruggs, all of whom are drastically older than him, then hell, I mean, he is not John Metchie. He's Jamar Chase. I mean, that would be absolutely absurd. Then you go over to 2020. You have a lot of those players gone. I mean, you have a player like Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy go into the NFL draft. But still, you have Devontae Smith there. And remember, this is Devontae Smith posting 1,800 receiving yards. There's almost 2,000 receiving yards for Devontae Smith this season. In my opinion, one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time in college for Devontae Smith here. Then you have Jalen Waddle also in this offense. Now, it's unfair to use the totals from Jalen Waddle to compare against John Metchie, because with Jalen Waddle here, he did get injured. With Jalen Waddle, he had the ankle injury. He only played 6 games. Waddle averaged about 90 receiving yards a game in those contests. But John Metchie, he got on the field. John Metchie had a role, and he was targeted quite often in this offense. With both Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle here, Najee Harris as well, he had over 70 receiving yards a game. That's impressive as a true sophomore. And it looked like John Metchie was finally going to get his chance this past season at Alabama. It looked like he was finally going to get his real shot to go ahead and be the wide receiver 1 here. But Jameson Williams transferred over. Now, if you look at the totals, this is why I'm not as big on Jameson Williams as a lot of people, because Jameson Williams didn't dominate at Alabama. John Metchie had a very large role. He had a significant target share in this offense, where if we're looking at Jameson Williams, he had over 1,500 receiving yards, but he played 15 games. Jameson Williams averaged 104 receiving yards on a per game basis. And now if we go ahead and we compare this to John Metchie was almost at 90. Like, the gap between these players with their receiving yards on a per game basis was sitting around 15. This wasn't a wide receiver 1 in a wide receiver 2 type situation. This was a wide receiver 1A and a wide receiver 1B. So if you're sitting here and you're in love with Jameson Williams, you have to be slightly intrigued with John Metchie. This is why before the NFL draft happened, we said John Metchie was one of our favorite targets in the later rounds of Dynasty rookie drafts. We clearly prefer him over all those running backs outside the top 3 guys. And I think that most people are probably going to be in line with that now, because he goes round 2. It's a very bad landing spot. We also called this. We called the Houston Texans taking receiver, and they traded up to grab him. You love to see when teams trade up to get that player as well. Now, I will say, John Metchie, if you're putting him in our wide receiver prospect model, he's going to score very poorly. I mean, his dominator rating, 25.98%. He accounted for about a fourth of that Alabama passing offense on a per game basis his final season there. He didn't break out until he was a junior. He ran a 4.60 40-yard dash, which, as we've said, wide receiver, if you run a 4.60, I'm honestly not that concerned whatsoever. I'm really not going to be dinging you in our model. But this is a wide receiver you can't put into the model because the situation he was in. This is someone that you almost have to trust the NFL talent evaluators. You have to trust what people see on film. And for John Metchie to go here, let me get the exact pick he went. Obviously, the Houston Texans traded up to get him, but I believe, it was pick 44 Interesting to see the Cleveland Browns trade back. Figured the Cleveland Browns would just take him if they wanted him here. But John Metchie goes ahead of someone like George Pickens that a lot of people liked over him. Now, I'm still going to rank George Pickens, assuming he goes in the second round, over John Metchie. But this is a Houston Texans team that next year, they can bring in Bryce Young. They can go out there. They can bring in CJ Stroud. This is a team that could easily end up with the first overall pick. Now, I was mistaken on one thing. Whenever we came out and we were saying to sell high on wide receivers before the NFL draft, we were saying to sell high on Terry McLaurin, Elijah Moore, Brandon Cooks, because we were worried about those teams adding wide receiver talent. I was incorrect in saying that Brandon Cooks only had 1 year left on his contract. Brandon Cooks actually signed a contract extension. If you look at the guaranteed money as well, Brandon Cooks has a ton of guaranteed money. I mean, obviously they can't move on from him this year. $43 million on the dead cap. Next year, $33 million on the dead cap. They're not going to be able to move on from Brandon Cooks unless they decide to trade him until 2024, where they could then decide to save $17 million in 2024 by moving on from Brandon Cooks, and he'll be 31 at that point. So we can assume that Brandon Cooks is probably out of Houston in 2024. But over the next 2 seasons, you do have Brandon Cooks on this roster. I'm going to assume Brandon Cooks is the wide receiver 1 here. Now, Nico Collins, a thing of the past. Nico Collins is sliding down the depth chart. Easily John Metchie is coming into play over him. But I'll be interested in your opinion with this landing spot. Obviously, it's not great on paper, but if they're able to get that long-term upgraded quarterback next offseason, I think it could be much more intriguing. And as it stands, with John Metchie, I'm still going to have that same stance unless we get a massive surprise with one of these later round running backs. I'm taking John Metchie over all these RBs not named Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller. I'm taking him over all of them. That hasn't changed whatsoever. Get your Dameon Pierce out of here. Get your Brian Robinson out of here. Get your Shad White out of here. We're probably going John Metchie. But, of course, thank you so much for checking out the live stream. If you have not done so already, please go down there. Drop a like on the stream. I genuinely appreciate you. And I am looking forward to the rest of this draft. And hopefully we get another live stream.